Thanks for checking out my new show on the Deathwish Radio Network called Dialogues. Every few weeks or so, I'll be speaking with friends and people I respect in and outside the music and art worlds. The first installment of Dialogues is a two-part conversation with my old friend Andy Williams from Every Time I Die. Every Time I Die's new album, From Parts Unknown, is out now on Epitaph Records. In this first installment, we discuss aging in hardcore, the golden era of wrestling, bands and labels being ridiculous, and even buying underwear with Rob Halford. Look for part 2 of the conversation to be posted in the coming weeks. What are you doing in California? Just the knee stuff, or are you just
I'm kind of not like, I wouldn't say I'm partnered up, but I'm kind of like synonymously known for wearing that Violent Gentleman stuff.
Right.
And whenever they do, it's pretty rad. Like, a lot of people think it's like very jock based, you know what I mean? But it's not like your typical like give blood hockey thing, you know what I mean? They do art shows and stuff like that, and they do really cool things. Like, they did a movie night where they played, you know, they rented out a theater and showed Slapshot and made like prints. They made like Slapshot prints for people to take home and stuff like that, done by an artist. And like, they do a whole bunch of stuff that's really cool, like art-based stuff that's, you really don't think of, like, when you think of like I guess basically like a hockey clothing line or something like that. You know what I mean? So, yeah, they fly me out to do like DJing, I guess, if you want to call it that. Like, I play songs for people that are looking at art.
That's
and
cool.
It's not bad, you know. I get a trip to California for it, and it just all worked out where I had an appointment with a doctor out here anyway, so it kind of all worked out.
So are you going
just
to
like
have surgery there, or is that your plan?
Yeah, there's a company called Music Cares.
Yeah.
I don't know if you looked into that with your knee stuff or whatever, but
you actually told me about Music Cares. I did not, because I felt like I just wanted to kind of go local and do it quickly, especially after my issues. But
of course.
But yeah, you did tell me about it. Why don't you talk about it a little bit?
Yeah. It's pretty rad. I might be getting this wrong, but I think it's owned by Bono and like a few other dudes, like Eddie Vedder or something like that.
Okay.
And they basically just throw their money in this pot. And it's this company that kind of like took it and basically said, hey, if you toured longer than 6 years and you have troubles with your knees or, you know, anything, basically they'll take care of your teeth, eyes. Basically, if you're a musician that needs, that doesn't have insurance, they'll help you out.
Right.
And you should, you know, take a look at the website if you're listening to this, and it's pretty rad. And basically that's what it was. A guy named Mike Farr that works for them, he was like, hey, man, you know, I could help you with your knees. And I was like, oh, really? And he had seen me on Warped Tour this year, hobbling around, you know, putting my knee braces on. And, you know, it's you know, I don't want to, it's just, you know how it is. And getting on stage, like you like, I don't know how long you warm up for, but like, dude, I have to warm up for like 45 minutes to an hour before I get on stage.
Yeah. So, it's rough. It's really rough.
Yeah. And he's seen me doing that, and it was just, you know, he was like, yo, I can help you. And so I kind of took his lead on it.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. That's a super cool program. Yeah, it's people don't realize the toll that music can take on, especially like dudes who play aggressive music, heavy music, however you want to define it. We all run around like idiots, and, you know, we're not 18 years old anymore. We don't just bounce back like we used to, you know? So.
Oh, yeah. That was like how I like explain it. Is like, I remember jumping fully off a large stage, like the Showplace Theater in Buffalo. Like, that stage is pretty high.
Yeah.
I remember jumping off it, people moving, and me just landing on my feet and being okay. Just being like, boom. Now, if I jump off like a step, I'm like, oh shit, like this could be bad. If I jump off this one step, like down too hard,
right.
Like, it's just, oh man, it's a frustrating thing, especially if you have any type of real passion for what you do. And I'm that guy that, like, I hate feeling like we're ripping kids off, and Yeah, I just, with me hobbling around and stuff like that, it's like I have to give everything I have to play because I'm hurting. So like my knees are hurting so bad. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, I've gotten off a stage where I'm just like, God damn it. Like I didn't give these kids everything. I feel bad about it.
That's a really horrible feeling. I also have that same philosophy where, it's not so much for the kids as much as it's for me. Like, I want to go out and I want to play a show and give it, like, without it being a cliche, like, I'm going to give it 110% all the time. I want to play and I want to leave myself emotionally out there. And a lot of it comes from just being nervous, and so physically, running around and being energetic and just sort of getting lost in song, it requires a lot of physicality. And your body, it's like I need, if I feel like I'm not in that zone, which has only happened a few times, thankfully, it's a really hard thing for me to mentally deal with, psychologically deal with after the fact, after a show or whatever. I don't like that feeling at all. It's a horrible feeling when you feel like it wasn't 100%, Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, I don't know. I just look at it like, at some point in time, like you do art and stuff like that. And like, that's a whole different world of mental, like, capacity that I don't have. Like, I can't say, I mean, I'm sure it's in there somewhere. I've just never pulled it out.
Right.
So with playing guitar and playing music, it's like you said, it's like, that's my only outlet. Yeah. Like when it comes to that type of artistic thing. And it's just a horrible feeling when, you get off stage and you're just like, come on, man. Like, I feel like I have so much more, the show's over and it's just a weird feeling.
So, do you remember when we met? Because I don't remember when we met. I have no idea.
Boy, I can tell you, this is actually kind of funny. So, you guys played with Dead Guy at some
Coalesce. It was
Coalesce.
Dead Guy, Coalesce, and I remember there was. There was Converge, Dead Guy, Coalesce. It was a weekend of shows. We played Buffalo and we played New York City. I recall it because it was one of the first times we played CB's, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you guys played CB's the night before or something like that. I remember you saying something about that.
Yeah.
So I didn't meet you guys there, but I was at that show. And then you guys played, I think it was right after when Forever Comes Crashing came out. You guys played Mercury Theater in Buffalo, and it was with Today's the Day.
Yep.
And Dillinger, maybe? It was that like weird Relapse tour thing.
Okay, yep. I remember playing those shows too.
I remember I grabbed a kid and powerbombed a kid at the show. And I remember after you guys got done, you were like, that was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And that was kind of like the first time there was a connection. And then from that point on, I think you had remembered me. Like if I had seen at another show, we started talking from there. Because I think we marked out on wrestling like right after that.
Speaking of which, I saw your. I took a break from working. I've been doing just a bunch of work today, and sometimes I need the internet to decompress. And I saw that Ox Baker passed away today.
Yeah.
That's
today. Such a bummer.
Such a bummer. And
I'll say this though, you gotta like Eddie Guerrero was like an enormous bummer because that dude had more.
Well, you know
what I mean.
But for me, it's tough because I don't. Eddie Guerrero, I have, I have some sort of idea of Eddie Guerrero, but he was around after I stopped paying attention to wrestling. I mean, he was there when I was getting out of it as a kid. But like my heyday, like the last pay-per-view I think I purchased was maybe uh, Starcade 88 or 89.
Okay.
Like those glory years and like the golden years or whatever of stuff. But I was, I was definitely aware of, like ECW stuff and like stuff in Japan and like some of like the smaller dudes like Guerrero and stuff. But I have a really intense connection to the weird group of misfit characters that were the 80s wrestlers, and their backstories. It always interests me. They're always fascinating to me, mainly because I have such a weird connection to them in my childhood. But like as far as like star power and stuff, Eddie Guerrero, I didn't really have that much of a connection with. But Ox Baker, he was also Ox was a generation kind of before what I was into. I knew him more as a guy that was an actor that was in Escape from New York. And stuff like that, and just being a sort of a cult sort of guy, but he was still awesome. He was
wrestlers don't look like that anymore.
No,
there's never going to be an Ox Baker.
No,
and that was the thing. What I was saying is like, there's dudes that, when we were a kid, when we were kids, fuck man, all the Von Erichs died when we were kids.
I'm still obsessed with the Von Erichs. I still think about the Von Erichs.
Every single one of those dudes. Well, maybe like. Kerry obviously, if he didn't lose his foot, that dude probably would have been up there with like the Ultimate Warrior or like, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But I mean, that dude had more. Well, like Ox Baker, if you think about it, this dude had a life of just getting beat up, and he lived until he was 80.
Yeah,
that's pretty sick.
It is pretty sick. I mean, that generation is unreal. Have you read any of the sort of autobiographies that have come out of wrestlers of that time period?
I just finished right before this tour. I finished the British Bulldog, not British Bulldogs.
Dynamite Kid. That one's great. I read that one. Yeah. That was a fantastic one. I read Stan Hansen's as well.
I just bought it. I haven't had it yet. I just bought it.
It's definitely he's a favorite of mine personally.
It's one of my favorites. If I ever was a wrestler, which I guess we could talk about, because I'm in the midst of right now. Like the reason why the knee surgeries are happening is because I want to do at least 10 matches next year.
Okay.
And do like an actual thing. It's just like a bucket list thing. I'm like, well, I'm going to be 40 in 2 years. I might as well try to do this. And I don't even give a shit. I don't care if anyone's there. I'll do 5 healers. So I can get in a ring and wrestle.
Yeah.
Dude, I was like, it's just kind of like a little bucket list thing. And Stan Hansen, that's always the thing. Right? I always wanted to be like a cowboy badass.
Sure.
Rawhide. You know what I mean? Like ass whooper. Obviously, I'm from North Tonawanda, New York, so that's far from.
It's far from your reality, but hey, that's all right. That's you're just you're trying to make something work for your character,
Yeah.
Well, you could be like the Rust Belt Kid,
Yeah.
You could be something ridiculous.
Thinking of Stan Hansen, man, just like if you look back at wrestling was so cool.
It really was. It blurred the lines. Well, in our day, it blurred the lines between reality and in real life in such a way that will never happen ever again. It's something that it was amazing.
Nowadays, you have there's a show about the girlfriends of the wrestlers.
Right.
There's just too much reality. Like I don't give a shit who's dating who or anything like that. I want to see this gnarly looking dude. The backstory can be whatever. The backstory could be like they saw each other at a bar and blah blah blah. And then they used to do those like Four Horsemen cuts. Do you remember when the Four Horsemen beat up Dusty?
Sure, I do.
Broke his arm.
Yeah, of course.
Dude, that was fantastic.
Anytime
if you watch it now,
it still looks
like
real.
As an adult. Yeah, as an adult though, you're watching it. It's very A to C. There's no B. It's just like they skip that. It's just they're in a parking lot. Dusty gets his ass kicked, and then they're going to have a match about it.
Well, what was the amazing thing about, I guess people would just call it the NWA, Georgia Championship Wrestling. That was my shit. I started watching it when it was Georgia Championship Wrestling on TBS, and then it switched to it became World Championship Wrestling mixed. And then it became it was like NWA's World Championship Wrestling. Then it just became WCW, and was eventually what it was. It was completely villain based. Okay, it was always villain centric, meaning with the WWF and the sort of Hulk Hogan era of things, and even going back further to like Bob Backlund and whatnot, and Bruno Sammartino, they were always considered heroes or baby faces in some way, and they were always the one that vanished the villain. So it was always the good guy's superpower. He was always going to struggle, and he was always going to have all these bad guys come to him, like the Iron Sheik, or I don't even know who, or even Andre Turner,
King Kong Bundy,
Big John Studd, King Kong Bundy, whatever. Like that's what you had. But in the NWA and virtually, I think everywhere except for Memphis. Memphis, you had
Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry was essentially the Hulk Hogan figure, and Jerry was always on top, and Jeff Jarrett later was always on top. But you had this really interesting thing that with the NWA, where you always had a bad guy, or at the very least a gray area with your champion. The champion was virtually never a babyface. It was always about the babyface's struggle to become champion. So you always had this like really dramatic, really hot feud that would culminate in some sort of pay-per-view, whether it be like Barry Windham or Sting or Ricky Steamboat or Magnum TA or Nikita Koloff when he became a babyface, always trying to take the belts off of Ric Flair. Or one of my favorite crossovers when I was a kid was when Flair gave the belts to Kerry for I think just a day or a week or something like that. That whole thing. That to me, that was so interesting, and that's what pulled me into wrestling. That's what pulled me into world class, all that stuff. And like the AWA tried to do the baby face on top thing too with Rick Martel, and that stuff was a bum out. I always wanted something darker, and I don't know, I related to that more as a little kid. I thought that was more interesting, and it was more believable too. It was super believable. You made way cooler characters.
I told the story yesterday, 2 days ago or something like that. Someone asked me how I got into wrestling, and it wasn't like a lot of people think that, especially our generation, think that Hogan was the guy. So they automatically think, oh, you got into wrestling, so you must be a Hogan fan. Right. Like, no, that guy was a piece of shit. He was always a piece of shit. When I was a kid, there was a kid in my neighborhood that had all the NWA toys. And I remember looking at an Abdul the Butcher. He had an Abdul the Butcher toy.
Okay.
I remember being like, this guy's awesome. Like, he's got, like, the curled toes. Yep. And then once I saw pictures of him, and he was, covered in blood, had a fork in his hand. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, he was the coolest guy ever.
Yeah, it was amazing. And then once I saw the Piper, I remember the Piper Greg Valentine strap match.
Oh, the dog collar match. Yeah,
dude, was it.
Starcade. Yeah, that was a Starcade match. Yeah, it was unbelievable.
I remember I painted when I was a kid. I had to paint a picture, and I painted that a picture of like Valentine with a chain, wrapped around Piper's neck, and he was like pulling it, but like the way Valentine's hair was, because he had like the blonde hair, like Flair. Sure. So when those dudes bled, it looked insane.
Yeah. That was the reason why they would they would dye their hair, because it looked better on TV. They thought, and it looked really cool with blood, like Dusty Rhodes covered in blood. Come on, that's awesome.
Yeah, awesome. It's it's kind of funny. So what we do, we're in bands and we get on stage and we play, and the whole thing is supposed to be entertainment, and at the same time, and then there's other things of just like I want to go to a place, and like every time I die is very, I'm never going to say the word competitive because we're not competitive, but it's just one of those things where we never went down a path. So
Right.
like we were never like a metal band, a punk band, whatever. So our whole thing was just like, well, who cares? Let's go in there and just smash the place and have everybody remember us.
Sure.
So like that was the thing. Wrestling, it's kind of similar to that when there was territories where it was like Flair would go in there and these dudes, these younger dudes would be like, well, he's the man, you know, because he had the belt. I mean, dude, I think he still has a record, like 17 title defense, you know, he's had the belt 17 times or some shit like that, which is retarded. But we never I never thought about like fucking wearing something that would be flashy or something like that. So people would leave going, oh, do you remember the guitar player of that band? Like he had blonde hair, so it looked good and light, like blah, blah, blah. I'm sure like Poison probably thinks like that.
Yeah. Well, that is the glam thing. That's, you know, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But I remember like seeing like Kurt on stage. He's wearing like ASIC, like dad running shoes.
Right,
and
right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like it's funny how like our base of entertainment and like that type of entertainment are completely two different worlds. But
they are, but you know what though? It's the anti, which is interesting. You know, as you said, you know, you guys don't pay attention to that sort of thing. We certainly don't either. You know, 4 individual characters that are, it's just who we are as people. You know, we're goofy, we're fun, we're kind of dark and complex in our own weird ways. But we don't. But it's very real. It's not. It's nothing that's constructed or, you know, prepared for an audience or something like that. And I think your band is very similar to that. Your band's though is a little more sassy and tongue in cheek than our band is, and I think that it has to do with the personalities. You know, I think that, you know, Jordan's a fun guy, Keith's a fun guy, you're a fun guy. Yeah. You know, and you guys are the base of the band, and that's just, you know, the foundation of the band or whatever, and that's what comes off. That's what comes off. You have very serious songs and songs that are emotionally complex, but they're not dark in a way that you listen to and are bummed out, you know? That's something that's really interesting about your band.
Do you think, though, this is something that because every time I have a podcast, me and our bass player Steve do a podcast.
Yep.
And when you need to interview a pro wrestler.
You think?
I feel like because dude, the similarities are unreal. MMA dudes. I don't know if you asked me about Josh or whatever, like Josh Barnett.
Yeah.
Did you talk to him yet?
No, I haven't talked to Josh yet. I got to reach out to him.
If you reach out to him, dude, you got to think like they travel. They have, you know, there's nothing worse than like traveling and trying. You have a budget, no matter what. Like when you're traveling, you could have. You're always going to have some sort of budget when you're traveling. Mm-hmm. And when we were early on, I mean, obviously both of our bands do pretty good. You know what I mean? In our world, we do all right.
Yeah.
So like eating isn't like, if you want to eat something certain and you know where the place is, you can go there and eat it.
Sure.
When we first started our bands, that wasn't, you were just eating.
Hell no.
So basically live, you know?
Yeah.
So if you talk to Barnett, he's got these stories about like when he first started. Yeah. And it's so similar to what we do. That's just insane.
I remember being on tour in 1995, and you know, these are tours that you did for the love of your music, much like we do now. But I mean, legitimately, because you're probably not going to make enough at the door to even pay for your gas to your next show. And I remember asking our I guess a friend at the time who was on tour with us, who put out a record for us, if I could borrow, I think it was $3 from him, so I could buy a loaf of bread so I would have something to eat, because I didn't eat the day before, and we were on tour, and I had all I had was sink water and a Snapple, I think, at that point, and after, within like a 24-hour period, and we were at some shitty bodega in the middle of nowhere, and he said no. And I remember I had to wait until we got to, I don't know, it was like another 6 or 7 hour drive, and we played another show. And then I remember I don't know, eating I don't know, something that a generous kid made and brought to the show or whatever, and I resented him so much because he, not the kid who got us food, but the kid who put out our record who, wasn't really helpful. It's like, you're benefiting from our band, and you can't, I'll pay you back your fucking $3. I just need to eat, man. And it was just this just no. And honestly, I never forgot that. And I basically stopped. That guy was no longer my friend after that point. And not because of the, something as trivial as fucking bread, but it told me a lot about his character, I was his friend. I was fucking hurting, I needed some help. And, every night he was selling records and benefiting from financially, and he couldn't fucking give me $3 to live.
$3.
Yeah, it's a bum out, man. But I definitely relate to that struggle for sure.
Yeah, I remember when I first started touring. Whoops, sorry.
What's that?
Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. It's all you.
When I first started touring, I started touring with Buried Alive. It was when I first started hitting the road,
Yep.
And I remember doing a tour, and I used to buy the long French bread.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and I would buy a jar of ragu.
Yeah.
And it would last for 2 days. And I remember trying to ration that big thing. I was well, I can only get 2 pulls off this thing in this time, and then you're hoping that the guy you stay with at night's hey man, I'll make some pasta or something like that.
Sure, yeah.
And you would bank on that. But when Every Time I Die first started, we were touring in 2 Altimas.
Yeah.
We had 2. We had 2 Altimas that we were touring in, and there was no money. You know what I mean? There was. It's insane how different it is now compared to when we first started. You had a Rolodex of numbers, and that's who you would call. Sometimes they would answer, sometimes they wouldn't.
Sure.
And you'd be on the way to the show, so you hadn't heard from the person. And the one thing I miss a lot of it. I kind of like the hustle.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I really miss is the fact that you never knew who you were playing with until you got to the show. Oh,
definitely. Do you remember I remember we had our directions in 1996, I think, or 5 or 6. We were on a summer tour. Our directions were a binder that we made, right? And it was just like a soft fucking binder. It somehow went out the window on the way to the first show in New Jersey. It was the Bible for us. It was it was literally everything. There was no backup. I wasn't in a position to even I don't think I booked the tour. I think I think Pike may have even booked the tour. It was a long time ago. But yeah, we had no direct. We still had the list of phone numbers, but we had no directions, and we missed our show. I believe because of that whole ordeal. Now it was a show at Handy Street. Do you remember Handy Street?
Yeah.
Okay. So we missed our Handy Street show, and we were that was a house in New Jersey where a lot of bands played at the time, like Lifetime and stuff or whatever, for people listening. And I remember the guys put together a show for they got us on another show, and it was us and Hatebreed were playing at a club down the street, and we just got thrown on that, and it was the weirdest thing. And I think about that now. There was probably 8 people there that paid for conversion Hatebreed, literally 8 people, and I just think about that now. It's it's so fucking wild. So wild.
Yeah, but the thing is, you can't I just love the fact that you could show up and be oh, Converge is on the show today. Well, we had no idea. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It was just so cool to just not. So now everything's a package. So it's gotten so boring to like think about like that, where it's just like, oh man, really? Like there's no, come on, like this is the same band for 40 days, like the same bands, and you're just like, tour's cool, and the only thing it sucks about the package tours is that you kind of become more of a music snob, or you become the biggest I don't even know you're so content with what you're touring with that you start liking it. Okay. So you like, it's something that you normally would never like because it's this package tour, and it's with Every Time I Die, I guess it's a little more different than with you guys. You guys have always kind of had free reign.
We're insane snobs. That's our problem.
Yeah. Well, not really though, because at the end of the day, you get to do what you want. You know what I mean? Not saying Every Time I can't do what we want, but it's just a matter of like, we systematically try to do things so far out there that like, it's like, okay, yeah, well, fuck it. Yeah, we'll do a Bouncing Souls tour. You know what I mean? But not necessarily have ever toured with or played with any band that would sound like Bouncing Souls, but like you go out there and then like, I'm not the biggest fan of like poppy punk stuff. But then you go on tour and you're like, you're with a band for like 35 days and then something clicks. Yeah. You're like, oh, okay, I get this. You know, not using Bouncing Souls as an example. I love Bouncing Souls, but right. You know, just that type of thing. And
something out of character.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what it is too is Every Time I Die is, oh God, Mr. Brett. Every Time I Die has always been conscious of a record label. Yeah. Too, where it's like, instead of worrying about how we are perceived, as opposed to let's play to as many people as we possibly can type of thing. Yeah, and it's like, I don't think it's hurt us. It's just at the same time, it's like there's tours where we're like, oh, come on, man. Like we did the All Stars tour, this like branded tour last year, and it was literally a nightmare. Like it was an actual nightmare. Like it was just, we had like Terror was on it, so we had Buds. Yeah. Straight from the Path was on it. Like I said, we had Friends, and then it was just all these bands that like we literally had. I mean, dude, I'm going to be 37 in December, and there was kids on that, like children on that tour. You know what I mean? Like coming up, they're talking, and like, dude, there's guys plugging in computers. There was like bands who were like, the whole second guitar player was just a computer. Okay.
It's crazy.
Like they would check the guitars. He would hit the space bar. It would start, and then he would check the guitar. That's how he would check the guitar. And yeah. I'm just like, Vogel is older than me, and he's just like, dude. Like I remember one band played. He walked, on it. We shared a bus with those dudes, and he walked up on the bus, and he was just like, dude, you got to go inside right now. There's the most insane things happening on stage right now. It's like floored at like anything modern, you know what I mean? Yeah. But yeah.
Well, I mean,
it's a different world.
Here's the thing: like, it's a very tricky position because I feel that when we start talking about things like this, it's really easy to be the old guy, and go, I remember when it was like, it was the way it was when we were kids or whatever, and bands, plug directly into their amp and it, whatever. And we all have our different sort of definition of what something is in its most pure form. Now, when you see younger bands coming up like that, do you immediately dismiss them or do you give them a shot?
Dude, I'm literally, I try to stay, clear mind on everything. I honestly will give everything a chance. I'm one of those people that I don't ever want to be jaded. And I listen to kids, you know what I mean? Like if a dude comes with sometimes the age gap is just so huge. Sure. I don't know what they're talking about. So I actually have to do research on what they're talking about. So like they'll mention a band and it 9 times out of 10, probably not my cup of tea, but I'll check it out and be like, okay. And then they'll ask me like, oh, did you check this band out? It's like, yeah, you know, it's cool, but it's just not there. It's not what I would be into, you know?
Yeah. I relate to that as well. I don't, I try to be open-minded, but I still listen to the same, the same music that affected me when I was, at different points in my life, I guess. I'll say when I was younger, but it's not really that. There's some records that come out now that affect me, but they're usually not sonically in tune with what people would consider musical peers of your band or my band or whatever. You know, I don't hang out and listen to metallic hardcore. You know, it's just not. It's just not something that interests me. You know, and it's not that it's not valid. You know, because it's certainly valid to the people that that it speaks to, but not all of it calls to me in some way or moves me in any way that I care to talk about. It just doesn't. Most of it doesn't. But then every once in a while, I'll hear a new band and I'll be completely blown away. You know. It just it's an interesting place to be for sure. You know. Well. Yeah. So relating to your band, you did virtually every package tour and almost like a touring festival that I can think of. You guys have done at least the big ones, and that's a really interesting place for a metallic hardcore band, for lack of better terminology. That's a very unique place for you guys to be. Most things, pop punk bands are relegated to Warped Tour for the most part, or whatever. Metal bands have their own sort of packages, but you've done everything. Now, it's weird. You guys also came up in what I would consider the Ozfest boom, and what I mean by that is like it's the just really ridiculous spending that was happening back then by record labels, by strange drink companies that had nothing to do with music. It's just really weird shit. And if you look back at it, most of those bands have faded away. I do. I have a theory about it. I have a 100% theory about it. And I would love to hear your theory, because that was one of the things I wanted to get your opinion on.
I honestly think it's this. Like, we were the first 2004 Ozfest had Every Time I Die. It was Every Time I Die, Throwdown, Unearth, Atreyu, Hatebreed was on it. But it was all those bands, the bands you're talking about right now. I guess you could probably put like Poison Well in that category. You could put From Autumn to Ashes in that category. The thing is Every Time I Die never, all that stuff that you're talking about, the drinks and these wild things that are just thrown at people. The problem that happens, that you've probably seen it, you definitely have seen it. You see bands go, yeah, fuck yeah. And that's what they worry about. They worry about that shit. They don't worry about their music. They don't worry about the touring. They don't worry about that stuff. They worry about all the other shit. Mm-hmm. And what happens is 6 years down the line, you see a band that was on that tour still on a Jägermeister tour. 6 years later, they haven't done anything different. They literally have done the exact same thing over and over and over again. And what it is it's because the ridiculous spending. Like, does your bass player really need a tech? You know what I mean? Does everybody in the band need a tech? Do you need to tour in a bus every single time? I feel like if you need to tour in a bus because you're not getting along, you shouldn't be a band. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, you're wasting that much money, which means it's affecting your life big time because you have no take home.
It's so sad.
What I mean? Well, you're basically touring to tour. You're not touring to play music.
I have a theory too. Related to that though, there's the bands that are at fault, but I also think that there was a lot of record labels at fault. And I feel that there was a sort of a mindset that was perpetuated by a lot of record labels at the time that just said, hey, bands, you're going to be you're so big, you're selling all of these records, you guys have, you know, this limitless potential. And they would borrow money from distributors. They would make sponsorship deals, promise bands things that they couldn't deliver, tell bands that they would lie to these promoters of these festivals and say, yeah, these bands are selling, you know, thousands of records a week. They're all unstoppable freight trains. All of them.
Yeah.
And they all deserve to be on the tour. If they're not on the tour, if they're not on the tour, you're missing out. You're going to look foolish. And everybody would say, okay, well, like, throw them on, you know, we charge X amount for these bands to be on the tour. They would all do it, and there was no return because it was all based in false promises of success that didn't exist. And then now you have a lot of bands that get pissed off about what money that they think that they should have made from, you know, record label A or B. And, you know, you see these stories of, you know, bands being pissed off. It's like, dude, like, you know how many records you sell, you know, regardless. I don't care what people put out there publicly, you know, because I see these like strange fights on the internet occasionally.
Oh, it's so dumb. Yeah.
And I just don't understand. It's like, you know what you sold. You know what your statements are. You know what you spent as a band. Like, don't make it something like, mind you, I think a lot of these record labels are just as at fault, but like the bands can't be ignorant to the fact that they played a huge part in believing these unbelievable stories.
I don't think they realize that stuff comes out of them. You know what I mean? Like, we were fortunate enough that 2004 Ozfest was the first time that they actually paid bands.
Okay.
So they actually paid the second. So none of us paid to get on, but the thing that people don't understand is you're getting paid. You're touring in a bus. They had a rule.
Mm-hmm.
You had to tour in a bus. You couldn't tour in a van. So us and Unearth shared a bus on that tour. We were only getting paid $500 a show.
Okay.
So like you have to pay. You have to pay. You have to pay for that bus. So like that's coming out of your money. You're only selling about 9 shirts a day.
Right.
Like that was like a good day. You know what I mean? Like if you sold 9 shirts on that, it was literally that was, looking back, it was the worst tour we ever did. Like financially, it didn't really it wasn't like if we did like a headlining tour after that, it wasn't like we were seeing all these like new Slipknot fans or something like that at our shows.
Sure.
It was just, you know what I mean? It was just, okay, well, business as usual. Here we go, you know? But yeah, it was just, there was so much retarded things, and there was an insurance thing that we had to all pay, and it was like, I want to say it was like $20,000 before we'd even went on the tour. We had to pay $20,000 in insurance by band. And we were on Ferret, and, you know, Carl's our buddy, and like, was like, yeah, I'll put this up. And then we knew that we had to pay him back, you know, and it eventually came back, but we never saw royalties and stuff like that because, we never saw royalties.
Well, Carl took care of you guys in a lot of ways. You know, I know he definitely believed in you guys at a point and took a lot of risks with your band, which I think were really noble risks, you know.
Still to this day.
Yeah.
Still to this day.
Yep. And I don't think like he's just a fan of bands, and that's awesome. Yeah. You know, he took risks with our band when we started. You know, there was no reason for him to put out, you know, our record. He just saw something in it, and I still am thankful for him to, you know, just taking those leaps when he did. But yeah, man, a lot of bands have no understanding of just basic business. You know, it's just basic math problems, you know, like subtraction and addition. That's all it is, you know. Yeah. If something makes sense, you know.
Still bands to this day that we've toured with, and they're like flabbergasted flabbergasted. I think I said actually a weird word wrong. They actually, like, they're like, wait a second, how much money did you make after that tour? And it's like, oh, yeah, we did this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, we were on the same tour, and, like, we didn't get anything. And then we're like, yeah, but you were, like, in a bus. You were paying this guy $300 a week. You were paying that guy $300 a week. You were paying this guy $600 a week. This guy, and you're, like, doing the math in your head, and you're just like, do you really need that? Like, this, like, for real, do you really need to, like, the 45 minutes it takes you to change a guitar string or a guitar or two guitars, or, you know what I mean? Like you're all you're going to do is go walk around the block, mm-hmm. or sit on your computer or something like that. I'd rather save the money and take that $300 a week and put it in my pocket and be able to keep touring and stuff like that, than that. And that's what it was. It was just, like you said, like people just chirping in their ear. And then, you know, they're looking at, like, this might be, I mean, you might not want to say something like this, but like Jane Doe, they shipped a lot of that record.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Sure.
Because at that time, everybody was selling records. You know what I mean? Like, yep. It was just, it seemed like that. But I think it was like, it was stores buying records. It didn't mean that, because we shipped, I think, right around that time, Jane Doe came out. When did Jane Doe come out?
2001. Well, you know, you're on the right track. Basically, the way the retail game worked back then, and this was a evil thing, and it still happens to this day, but it's less malicious. But back then, what would happen was a distributor would say to a record label, they would say, hey, you know what? We have a whole lot of interest from this chain store, okay? This chain store will take in X amount of thousands of copies of this record at a discounted price. And they say, hey, that's great. We'll do it. But the fine print, which a lot of people don't like to talk about, and a lot of bands don't understand this, is that most retailers have a right to return after X amount of days. And so it can be 60 days, it could be 90 days, 180 days, whatever the terms are, whatever they choose to put out there and are agreed upon. You could ship 10,000 copies, 20,000 copies of a record, and the band will be all excited, and they will say, hey, we're going to sell these records. We just shipped 20,000. And then guess what? In 180 days, 17,000 show up on pallets back to the record label. Yeah. It still happens. And you know what happens? That at that point, that's on now a record label has all this overstock that they have to deal with. You know, it happens to every record label. The good ones, bad ones, it happens to all. It happens to Deathwish. It's happened to us. Yeah. You know, and it's not it's a gamble. You know, we'll have distributors that'll ask for, you know, a shit ton of records, and it's up to us responsibly, as a responsible business, to actually decide if we're going to manufacture enough to meet that demand. And it's up to us to manage that. And mind you, it might not seem like something that you're benefiting a band. You might not. It might seem like you're actually hurting a band by saying, "Hey, you know what? We're not going to participate in this. You know, in this program, or you know, we're not going to do this retail incentive thing." But in the long term, it's much better for a band sometimes. You know, it's up to a record label to responsibly manage those things. And a lot of record labels are fucking stupid, honestly. Yeah. And they get all giddy too, and they go, "Oh, everyone loves us." It's like, that's great. People should love the records you're putting out, because you should believe in your records. You should be putting out great records. You know, it's not you have to be. It's always a gamble, but you always have to do your best to make the best decision for the bands that you are employed by, you know, and a lot of record labels just suck at it.
Yeah. At that time too, was right around the time that our type of bands started figuring out what the SoundScan thing was.
Sure.
So like, you would get this sheet of paper and it would tell you how many CDs. I think a lot of that stuff was very, very, I mean, I know we lied.
It was all bullshit.
What I mean?
We never, we tried to participate in, in actually doing sound scans on tour. And for people who are listening that don't understand what that is, it's pretty simple. It's just that, venues, you could sell a record at a venue, and there's this sound scan report that comes out. That's this sort of official count of how many records you have sold. But really, it's bullshit. It's a nice thing to see. Bullshit. Yeah, it's a good reference point, but it only counts for people that are participating, and a lot of record labels don't participate in it. A lot of record stores, independent record stores, don't participate in it. So it's not really an accurate assessment, especially for our style of music, as to how many records are selling. So like I've had Lambgoat reached out to me a few months ago and like asked what our best selling records were, or like SoundScan, and it was like based on, they were looking at sound scans and things. And I did not give them that information because it's, number one, it's none of their business, and it's not the public's business. It's the band's business as to how many records they sell.
Yeah, of course.
But it's not, sound scans are not an accurate way of looking at how many records are sold. It never has been. But people thought back then.
I just remember. Oh, it was insane though. I mean, the fucking amount of records that some of these bands would say they were selling.
Oh, crazy.
Was just like, dude, are you fucking kidding? Like, Christina Aguilera would be asking you to go on tour.
Yeah.
If that was the case.
Yeah, they were just lying.
It's Shadows Fall is asking you to go on tour, not the Rolling Stone.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you're not selling that many records.
Yeah, what do you feel? Like, I think that the last sort of death rattle of that manufactured hype thing was the sort of purchasing of social networking friends and whatnot that was occurring in a lot of those younger metallic hardcore bands. Maybe a couple years ago, I remember hearing about some stuff like that where like things weren't really on the up and up, and I would see these these sales sheets, these one sheets that go to stores and stuff for some of these bands, because we deal with the same distributors for bands that we release. And I would see things that would say like, band has over 600,000 fucking Facebook likes or bullshit. And you'd be like, who gives a shit? Seriously, who gives a shit?
I've seen that blow up in people's face. I remember someone I know that owns a label said, hey man, band, like 2 million people listen to their music on, Facebook, or I think it was MySpace at the time. He's like, oh man, I just picked them up, blah, blah, like, this has got to be great. I was like, so you haven't seen them play live? It's like, no. It's like, dude, it's like two kids in their fucking bedroom. You know what I mean? Like,
okay,
they might have put the song out there, and that was the fucking case, is that he signed this band, and it blew up in his face because they couldn't play live because the shit was just, it was manufactured, like, drum machine, and they didn't have a friend that could play drums like that.
Yeah, so
then when they played live, it was miserable, and that was that. They put one record up and gone.
That's sad. It's really sad to me. It's just, it is what it is. It's just it's the fault of the labels too that are gushing about that stuff and valuing it.
Have you ever? I'm sure that someone probably comes to you and says, "Hey man, you got to check this band out."
All the time, every day.
You know what I mean?
Literally every day.
Yeah, and you check them out online, and you're going to listen to it. You're going to go like that. The first thing you don't look at is, holy shit, they have this many friends on this thing. You're going to listen to the band, and then after that, maybe try to find a video on YouTube or something like that. Obviously, you can't be everywhere at the same time.
Right.
So, like, you're going to find a YouTube video if you really like it, and you're going to look, and you're going to see, oh, wow, they're live, they're playing shows, blah, blah. And then, like, I just couldn't believe that. I mean, that's literally, it's like fishing and trying to catch that one fish. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, sure. I'm going out today, I'm going to catch a striped bass, and that's it. But I'm going to go in this ocean over here. And I know they're there, so I'm gonna toss my line in there. And you can't, I just, I don't think that Clive Davis would ever look on a website and go, yeah, let's get them.
Right.
Pull these guys in.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's not how, I mean, that's not how our label works. And thankfully, and it never has been. And probably to a fault, I would say, you know, I mean, sure, you know, we release, you know, records that do well. For sure. Yeah. And, you know, you want them to do well, you know, it's a business. You want to sell as many copies as possible, but you also want to put out stuff that you're a fan of and you believe in. Like, I'd much rather release, like, you know, a record that sells very little that I think is one of the greatest records ever than, you know, put out something that I just have no faith in whatsoever, or at least or don't see any artistic merit in some way.
Yeah, of course.
You know, we find bands by just listening. That's it. It's just listening. You know, like we've kind of mutated into being a distributor as well as a record label over the last few years. So we carry thousands and thousands of titles from all these, you know, super cool labels and whatnot that we happen to dig. It's curated beauty, you know, sort of like boutique style in a way, and. You know, I hear lots of interesting music, and there's lots of interesting stuff out there. You know, we carry demos for bands, but we're not, you know, we're not exclusionary like that. And it just comes from listening, you know, and then you hear stuff, you know. That's how I heard Def Heaven. You know, I bought their demo. Yeah. I bought their demo online through their Bandcamp because I saw a mention of them on a blog. I think on a blog or two that I appreciated, that I would check out. And I said, hey, this is pretty interesting. Let me check this out. And I said, hey, this is cool. So I bought their demo, and, you know, that's how that relationship started, you know? And
there's just something rad. Like, the thing is, like, in our, like, I guess in your band, my band, there's these, we kind of are on a little bit of a pedestal, a little bit, where we can tell people, like, hey, check this out. Like, this is rad. You know what I mean? Like, if 12 people listen to me and find out about Code Orange Kids or something like that, you know what I mean? I'm stoked. Like,
sure.
You know, it's kind of like when I had an elder cousin. He took me in his room and he said, "This is music," and he played me Judas Priest, and that was like,
it's my favorite band of all time.
Mind blowing. Yeah. By the way, they were on that Ozfest that we were on.
I have a great story about that Ozfest and about Judas Priest. I'll have to confirm it with a guest coming up because it's his story. It's a really fucking good story though. About attacking Rob Halford by accident. And it's really, really funny. And he was a good sport. But actually physically assaulting Rob Halford by accident.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I bought underwear with him on that tour.
That's so cool. I would actually pay money to go underwear shopping with him. That's how much I respect him.
Dude, I'll tell you, I told the story on Barnett's. Maybe I told it. I think I told it on Barnett's podcast, but I'll tell a quick version. I get real weird around like the legendary status people. Like, in my head, like Tony Iommi is like my favorite guitar player. So like, you know what I mean? Like, having a conversation with Tony Iommi isn't even like, there's no chance of it happening in my head. Like, I'll sit there and just geek the whole time. So on that tour, Black Sabbath on that tour, this all happened within like 2 days or 3 days. I see Tony Iommi. I'm on the phone with my dad, and I like freak out. I'm like, holy shit, Tony Iommi's right here. And my dad's like, hey, go talk to him. I'm like, I can't talk to Tony Iommi. Like, are you kidding me? Tony Iommi starts walking towards me. The only thing that I have is a wall to my left and like hedges on the right. He looks me in the eye, and I just dove in the hedge. Like, I just jumped in the hedge and hid on the other side. And then he walked by. He kind of like looked in the hedge, and he like walked by, and I was like terrified.
So great.
So yeah. So then the next day, I'm in Walmart and I'm looking at underwear. I'm gonna buy whatever boxer briefs I was wearing. You know, I still wear it to this day. That is the worst information ever. So I'm looking at boxer briefs. It happens in the story. Rob Halford walks up, and I hear him. He's like, "Hey, do you wear these?" And I was like, "Oh I wear boxer briefs, man." And he goes, "Oh, you know, I always wore like the the briefs. I'm like, oh yeah, tidy whities, you know, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yeah. He's like, well, would you suggest me getting these? And I was like, hey man, listen, you got the length of a boxer, but you know where your shit's at because you're wearing like a brief. And he's like, okay. And he bought, on my recommendation, he bought boxer briefs. I hope he still wears them to this day. That'd be great.
That's great.
And then, yeah, just walked out and whatever. So then the next day I'm walking, and sitting right by their bus is Tony Iommi, Halford, and this guy, Jason, who was doing, he was TMing Superjoint Ritual.
Okay.
And he was we met him like on a tour before. He's like, Andy, come here. I want to introduce you to some friends. I was like, oh, fuck, here we go. I can't do this. So I walk up, and Halford's like, hey, man, I love these. And he's like talking about the boxer briefs. I was like, oh, that's great, man. Blah, blah. And then he goes to Tony Iommi. He goes to Tony Iommi. And Tony Iommi's like, did you jump in a bush the other day? And I was like, yeah, I jumped in a bush the other day. I'm really sorry about that. Blah, blah, blah. I like totally, I was like, dude, I'm kind of freaking out right now. You're like my favorite guitar player. And I just like marked out and kind of like walked away. But it was really funny. Like, Rob, you know, buying underwear with Rob Halford is it's
a highlight of your life.
Yeah, pretty interesting.
No, that is really good. Well, I don't think I can follow that properly. I've never purchased underwear with anybody moderately famous or iconic. I wish I have. It'd be really cool.
We were all on the same tour. That's how you gotta look at it. Just like Rob Halford shops at Walmart, just like everybody else.